We get here, we've only got the November issue has sort of recently come out in Australia. They come by ship, not by ferry, thank Christ, otherwise they wouldn't make it at all. And and there's a little bit of interesting background on that. And also, another very interesting article that we'll get to a bit later on plant variety rights. Remembering the Britons had plant variety rights since the early 60s, and now that the Thatcher government is moving towards privatisation, they're selling off their Plant Breeding Institute at Cambridge. And a lot of the sort of disasters foretold by people in this debate 2 weeks ago appear to be coming true thick and fast in England. It's just a pity this magazine didn't arrive a little bit earlier, and it's a bigger pity that our politicians don't read more than The Sun. Okay, so then we go on to Cassowaries. Showering can be dangerous. I've always thought that, Rog. I knew there was something wrong with having a shower. Right in the back of my mind, I knew that there was something really distinctly unhealthy about it.
Well, why did you hassle your landlord for one?
Because I was starting to stink a bit, and you don't get a good reception in Melbourne when you stink. A lot of people just aren't used to the natural pheromones that
Are we restricting this comment to the Melbourne metropolitan area?
Yeah, well, people in Gippsland used to always tell them I'd been out fishing.
Yes, I think we need wider pollution controls, air pollution.
And this week, sort of a rave, social responsibility in science. And there's been a whole lot of people who work and get paid big dollars to research in natural history who've been letting the side down badly. And I had some interesting conversations with some professors of Wollongong who will indeed be interviewed a little bit later about social responsibility in science. More about Green's Bush, and I'll have to throw the cassette in before we talk about that. And a bit more about St Kilda. It appears that we've gone, what did we go with St Kilda? We went through to a disaster because the inquiry came out and said that everything at St Kilda was sweet and they could go ahead and build the marina. Then we interviewed Jim Allinson, and Jim said, oh, it's all right, Conservation Forests and Lands will put into the study after the release of the results, there's no problem there. Then we went to another disaster as we realised it actually was released. It went from a rumour to reality. Then we spoke to Jim again and he said, oh, no trouble, we'll still be able to do a study. Now we're back to disaster again. It appears it's all absolute cocky snot, and they're not doing nothing. And St Kilda's got the golden stamp of approval regardless of what you found there. In fact, you could just about have a blue whale living in St Kilda Marina, and it looks like they built it. Scandal or corruption? Who in Conservation Forests and Lands told the Melbourne branch not to get involved in the St Kilda inquiry? Has some money changed hands? Is there deviancy? Is this the first sign of wicked corruption, or are we just being paranoid?
It doesn't even need money to change hands. It's mainly just, I think, personal ambition amongst the higher echelons of the public service that causes a lot of these things to happen.
Whatever it is, a head should roll at least. And it just appears, what's happening to our dear minister? Not a word. Not a bloody word.
No one tells her anything.
Well, she should ask.
She certainly should.
Why is it up to people like us to do
well,
these things?
perhaps we should give her a list of questions that she could ask of some of her
She'll be on the
minions.
show. We won't be able to ask it about 3 or 4 weeks. 3 or 4 weeks we will have the minister for a morning and evening show. Won't that be thrills, listeners? So we can ask her then. But I'm sure we'll get a good cagey... She's a good politician, so I'm sure we'll get an appropriately cagey reply. But anyway, you never know. We might even get some action. And so, fire up.
It is a holiday today. What are we starting on?
Hayden Listban and Soviet Fish Study.
Oh, good one.
It's an article in the Australian Thursday last week, Thursday the 5th of March. And I suppose the Australian was more interested in it as the political gesture of letting those commie bastards in here in the first place. But the interesting part to me is that, like with the fishing rights thing that's happening, the Soviet Union, like America, like Peru, like Chile, like Portugal, has a big fishing fleet, and it's an international fishing fleet. And the international fishing laws are quite interesting. For instance, the reason the Japanese squid boats came in here by their squillions, I forgot to mention Japan in that list of aggressive fishing countries, the reason the Japanese squid boats came in here in their millions was that there is an international maritime law that says if you don't exploit a particular fishing stock, then you cannot stop other fishing nations coming in to exploit it. And that's why we had Japanese squid boats, because we don't have a squid industry of our own. Now, you've heard on the Parrot before, if you've heard it before, and we might have a few listeners, this being the hangover at the Moomba Parade. What are you all doing listening anyway? You should be out there patriotically waving your bloody flags and watching the floats. They'd be rumbling past just now. But anyway, if you've listened to the show before, you'd realise the chronic state of the Victorian fishing industry. Last week we interviewed young Noddy about the state of the abalone, just complete ad hoc nature where fishermen just go charging off into these minor industries, very poor government funding, suspiciously corrupt marketing system for our fish, undershot prices, really limited opportunities for development of broader ranges of fish and all the rest of it. This is at a time when a lot of Europe, and particularly the Rhine River, which will come up later, has been far too polluted to provide fish, either by the wrecking of the estuaries, and certainly the demand for fish hasn't decreased at all. One would wonder how come it is that Australia, in its unique position of having one of the most phenomenal coastlines in the world and one of the most phenomenal fish resources in the world, can't get its act together and still imports 60% of our edible fish. Now, that's not to say we don't export at all, but the exports are a little bit dubious. Nobody quite knows what's going on there. But we do export stacks of orange ruffy, and if you watch Willisey or listen to this show over the last few weeks, you realise there's a species of fish called orange ruffy that is now schooling off northwest Tasmania in what they call a large pod. And the pod is about half a mile deep and 3 miles wide, and the trawlers are just cruising in there, dropping the trawl gear, which is like a big bag, dragging it through the pod and lifting these fish up and dumping them on the deck. They're getting them tonnes and tonnes and tonnes at the time, crushing the fish in the process and bringing back some pretty dubious quality fish. In fact, 3 containers were returned from the States last week that were off. And it's a little bit of private information inside the fishery marketry. So it's not doing Australia's export fish stuff much good. So this is just a really interesting side, excuse me, a very interesting sideline to this whole effort, that we have to have the Soviet Union to do a fish study of Australia's resources. Where are all these Andrew Hayes and Hugh Wrights and these great people for privatisation? Where's their bloody money for Australian fishing industry? Nowhere to be seen, and the government, per usual, is hiding.
Yeah, this is around the Heard and McDonald Islands in the Australian Antarctic Territory, so I don't believe it's actually in mainland waters. But someone was telling me...
Australian waters?
Yeah, it's definitely Australian waters. Someone was telling me something interesting about the salmon fishing in Western Australia, and they said that they'd heard it was all being made into fish paste.
Because you only get about 80 cents a kilo for salmon. Like, one of the biggest hassles with fish is the quality of Australian fish, and I was talking to an inlet fisherman about this and on the weekend, and he was saying, this is Corner Inlet down in South Gippsland, and he was saying that with the fish, in Japan, the Japanese market, if you bring a live fish to the market that's a fish that's still twitching, okay, so a live snapper, it's worth anything up to $45 a kilo. The same fish, dead in the body, been dead 2 or 3 days, even though it's still fresh, is only worth about $4 a kilo. Now, there's no such difference here. Any fish you send to the market, you get much the same bloody price, whether they're 2 days old, 3 days old. And he said to me that he was catching fish in the inlet on Saturday morning, which is the latest you're allowed to fish in Corner Inlet, sending them to market Tuesday with Monday's fish and no difference in price. And he said those fish can't be as good. They're 3 days old for a start. And if it was a really hot Saturday, he expected to get a lower price for them because he couldn't do anything about the quality. Now, with that kind of thing happening, there's no incentive for the development of a decent fishing industry. Something needs to be cleaned up. Hopefully the Department of Agriculture, who now have responsibility for it, will do a lot better job than conservation forests do. Not showing anything, I'm just hiding a pad.
I was wondering why you were waving a bare bit of paper at me. Well, we have a large article here at Yabbies, and of course Yabbies is becoming, dare I say it, one of the yuppie foods, but the haute cuisine of Australian freshwaters, and they're definitely getting very, very popular, and also in Western Australia, where they're called the maram over there. So
bigger yabby.
Yeah, there's people. It started off as a little bit of an alternative for farmers a few years ago, but now it's becoming big business to make yourself a few dams. I don't know if they seal the bottoms of them or anything like that, and starting breeding up yabby hatcheries, and the demand's pretty high because they are an excellent tasting flesh, because freshwater crustaceans aren't really common in the world as a food, and they're getting up to $40 a kilo from Scandinavian countries and all sorts of things like that, so they're definitely becoming much more popular.
When I was a kid, I caught some in the Merry Creek and took them into the John Batman Gardens restaurant through the main part of the restaurant in a plastic bag, and had a cook scream at me in another language irately and pay me $1 a kilo. but that was 20 years ago. But yes, there's hope for yabbies yet. And an interesting little sideline on this, it says, and this again reinforces what we were saying just before, in Europe a disease has all but wiped out the crayfish population, causing a huge demand for tasty substitutes such as yabbies. And there's a lot. Again, which state leads the country in money for fishing research? Guess.
Queensland?
Queensland, Joe's state, leads the time 10-1 on any other state. Joe for PM. Well, not quite anyway, but it's a pretty safe bet
The fishiest politician in Australia.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and he's well researched and fishy. So that's interesting. Maybe at this stage, Roger, I'll bring up this thing about the Rhine.
Well, yabbies, don't you worry about that. There's
No.
plenty of yabbies for you Southerners.
Yeah. All right. This week, 5 more chemical accidents. This week is 27th of November, remembering we're out of date. 5 more chemical accidents in West Germany and Switzerland polluted the air and water along the Rhine River. European environment groups are worried that such accidents are common but are being publicised only in the wake of the fire early this month at a Swiss chemical plant owned by Sandoz, which seriously polluted the Rhine. Last Thursday, a factory owned by Switzerland's largest chemical firm, Cybergigi, sounds really nuclear to me, but anyway, released a cloud of phenol near Basel.
Fennel?
Yeah, phenol neir Basel.
Isn't that the stuff that grows along railway lines?
No, it's the stuff you put in dunnies, you fool. Anyway, Hans Forkhauser, a spokesman for Cyber, says too much chemical catalyst was added to the 500 kilogram vat containing an epoxy resin, causing a runaway reaction. Werner Dreer of Cyber says that the vat had a valve to relieve the pressure, which led to a tank on the roof. As an added precaution, however, a hatch on the vat had also been left loose. The runaway vapours took the path of least resistance, boiled out over the hatch and out through the window. An automatic cooling system on the vat was insufficient to slow the runaway reaction, and which was to be expected, as chemical consultants said. Last Friday, West German firm BASF, which you buy cassette tapes from, you may desist from now on, announced that 1,100 kilograms of herbicide called dichlorophenoxacetic acid had leaked from its factory at Ludwigshafen. The state's Environment Ministry then forced BAS to admit that this estimate was 900 kilograms below the true level. A rusty pipe leaked the herbicide directly into the cooling water which flowed into the Rhine. Water authorities shut off water supplies to the towns and the rivers the herbicide passed by. BASF said the chemical would degrade quickly in water, but state government said it could linger for up to 4 months. Now, there appears to be a whole swag of chemical spills. Now, there are two things. Some of them, it appears, are one spill covering another. One of the difficulties in prosecution under European law, particularly cross-country, is that you have to prove that that particular company's pollution either did you out of business if you're an eel fisherman, or poisoned your stock, or poisoned you or your family if you're fishing or drinking the water. Now, with a whole lot of chemical companies, as Roger was saying this morning, putting the chemicals into the water at the same time, then it's very difficult to attribute your particular woe to any one particular company. And the companies have all said, yes, we'll pay full compensation just as long as you can prove it. The other thing is that this has also focused attention on the safety and health of chemical companies. Now, remembering that Europe's also suffering from phenomenal problems with acid rain, particularly in the last 10 years, and pollution generally, despite the fact that it's a catch cry that most people are getting sick of, obviously not enough's been done about it, and with this increased attention on chemical companies over there, we're finding that many of them are doing little spills here, there and everywhere as they have stuff-ups. We're dealing with literally thousands of companies throughout the world who are making noxious chemicals, all with varying degrees of safety from zilch to poor, and the very, very small percentage with good safety records. So an interesting note from Europe.
One of the interesting aspects about that is that a lot of the chemicals that were spilt in the Rhine were parts of manufacturing processes that have been banned for chemicals that are used in Europe. So that the spray or whatever it is banned in Europe, but they're still marketed and sold at the third world, and they're still making them in Europe. So it meant that things like mercury fulminate were dropped into the river in the Sandoz spill, and all sorts of stuff like that. And it was rather interesting. I was having a talk to a German guy a couple of weeks back who'd researched into the history of 2,4,5-T and 2,4-D and the manufacture of it. and apparently they've been making that for about 40 years. And the big problem with the poisonous effects of that was the dioxin, and that was actually made in the process when...
it's an impurity that comes out of the process.
When not enough care was taken in the process, you'd get dioxin levels of a few parts per million, and that was definitely high enough to cause adverse reactions. And they found out a little bit later on that they could make it with only a few parts per billion dioxin, or much, much less. That's 2,4-D, I think. And so now that they reckon they can make it at a fairly safe level, but it's been banned anyway because of the adverse publicity it's got over the last few years. But you've got to realise if they've been making it for 35...
or introduce a more expensive and safer process to get rid of these kind of pollutants, and companies have to be forced to do it. Otherwise, they don't care about everyone else. Look at the profit just for the company. It doesn't matter to them how many people die from whatever comes out of their stack or whatever they sell, as long as it can't be pinned on them. The moment it can be pinned on them, sure, they'll clean it up, but we can't wait that long. So many of these companies are doing things that we just haven't got the research money to do. Remember, 95% of the world's scientists are employed by industry, so we haven't got very many people around to bleat on these people for doing what they're doing. Lib, you've got an article on Cassowaries. We'll get off all this chemical crap.
Yeah, in the Weekend Age is an article about problems for cassowaries with maybe being faced with extinction. There's some quotes from a British ecologist, Dr. Norman Myers, who's out here for a National Endangered Species Conference. In the 70s, Dr. Myers was one of the first to warn that our planetary Noah's Ark had sprung a serious leak. Humanity was obliterating one species of plant or animal per day, 400 times greater than previous natural extinction levels. However, in September last year, some of the world's most respected biologists drastically upped Myers' estimate by claiming 2 extinctions were occurring every hour. So what Dr. Norman Myers is describing is the prospect of a mega extinction episode.
Am I on?
No, you're not.
No, I'm not on. I said, am I on, for all those who missed it? Yes, mega extinction. Well, people, it's a little bit... No, I don't know. Why tell everyone everything's going to die out? People are just going to throw up their bloody hands and give up. Far better maybe for Dr. Myers and his colleagues to talk about the kind of management needed to preserve species. And in the case of cassowaries, they live in lowland rainforest, which is one of those most threatened areas. There's no doubt they've paid their way in tourism 1,000 times over already, and they're used in just about every Queensland tourist brochure you'll ever see up there. Has got cassowaries plastered all over it, and yet they're a bird that's becoming very, very scarce. So, something else that we'll have to tackle. I suppose it's to do with credibility in science. It's one thing bleating about what's wrong, but how many of these scientists actually get down and work with management and work with people and suggest things that might be okay? There was a few other bits to that article, wasn't there, Lib? There's the photograph that's contained in that article, which was in
It's of
the
a
Age Extra.
nesting male, and I think it's the first photo ever been taken of cassowaries nesting, which I find something quite amazing.
Well, when we were up in Queensland actually last year, we spoke to a few people about the males, like emus. It's the male cassowary, and like the male emu, that looks after the eggs, and they're particularly aggressive. And this photo was the first photo believed to have been taken of a nesting male cassowary. It just shows how little attention they've received. So that's in Saturday's Extra on the Age. We're going to go into a cart because we've been interrupted by the breakfasters breakfasting late.
Okay. Well, I do believe that we have the breakfasters there, and shall we get them along? What are we going to talk about, actually?
Well, we'll
I suppose
find out.
Richard
We'll
will
find
tell
out
us that.
where the bloody hell they are. We in delay and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, yep. Hello, Richard.
You there, Richard?
Yeah, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there.
We're here.
Yeah, well, what are you doing up so late?
What do you mean?
Well, this breakfast show, you're usually back in bed off your trees by now after your pre-breakfast champagne.
Reese.
Mr. Ruth, what's going on out there, mate? Where are you?
We've just left Mornington, and there's a couple of fishermen there. I said I'd be talking to you, and they said they'd like to have a word with you later on.
Oh, yeah, concrete boots again, Richard. What the hell are you in out there? It's a strong wind warning today, mate. You shouldn't be out there. We might lose you. Gee, that'd be easy.
Hey, come on. No, between Melbourne and Mornington it was very rough actually, but we're a few minutes out of Sorrento, and we're just getting our passports checked at the moment, and we're getting our visas stamped, and we're about to pull into Sorrento, and Italy is fantastic this time of year. You should come down.
Italy.
The painters and dockers have come to Italy with us here, and my three sons, and it's looking pretty good. So if you want to, if any of your friends who aren't out hunting cassowaries or fishing or tramping through the bush and ruining it, they want to come down to Sorrento and see the painters and dockers in action, because we just played Mornington. It was fantastic.
Okay, are the painters and dockers going to do an anti-marina gig at Sorrento?
I believe they are. I'll just speak to them. I've got their manager right next to me, and I'll have a word to them about doing that. In fact, they're going to sabotage the marina, I believe.
Perhaps they could come back again when it's built and just blast it to bits.
Well, that's sort of something like what they did at Mornington, actually. I'll hand you over to Chris for his somewhat more erudite impressions of the day so far.
Oh, God. Hello, Erudite. How you going? Don't get your two epoxy resins mixed up or you get stuck. Go on. Fire up. What's happening?
G'day, Bob. How's it going?
Good, mate.
Have a hanging.
All right, mate. And did you go last night? Did you, you know?
I don't know what you're talking about, Bob, but anyway, we're having a great day out here. I've got the banana lounge out. I'm sucking on a orange juice. Got the sun hat. And I'm telling you should be out here. It's great.
Yeah, but how come we're not? You know, like, where's the invitations for the parrots to go out to the deep blue yonder? We wouldn't mind going to sea for a few days.
Well, if you had a top-rating show like ours, Bob, you'd be out here, but obviously you haven't, so keep working on it, all right?
We could have done a live to air and just listened to all those heaves over the side of the boat in wonderful weather like this.
Look, mate, cricket's jumping over a lot of stuff. Doesn't really sound good over the air.
Yeah, well, anyway, we can't quite match your wit and sarcasm, I'm sure, Chris, but the one thing we have got control of at the moment is the microphone, and so unless you've got anything really brilliant to say, we'll give you the big chop. Think of something brilliant, you've got 10 seconds.
I have, actually. We'll be calling you again at around 20 to 1, and we're on our way to Sorrento. We'll be there in about approximately 20 minutes, and we have to see a lot of people down there. By the way, there was heaps of people down at the Mornington Pier. I can't understand why they were up so early having a look at the dockers, but it was really good to see. It was great.
Yeah, well, Mornington's not exactly well sort of founded for bands, I don't think, down there. Good fossil site at Mornington, Chris. You should think of getting off the boat and having a bit of a dig.
I tried to, but they've got me tied up here, Bob, but I can't really go anywhere.
I suppose you'd feel behind getting close to that nude beach you go to all the time down there too.
I'll forget you said that, Bob, and I'll see you back at the station maybe next week when possibly your show may or may not be on.
What, have you got a new job as program scheduler? All right, so much for all this in-house bullshit. Bye-bye.
Bob.
Okay. Yes, well, the breakfast is there. And if there's anyone down on the Mornington Peninsula who isn't doing anything much, they haven't come to Melbourne for that ghastly parade, they can go down to Sorrento, site of proposed marina, as is every other locality around the bay, and go and see the painters and dockers rock the place to bits.
Blood oath, yeah, good idea. Okay, Libbet, we've got more. Have we?
Yeah.
Caught and stunned. Right, what's firing up this time?
Oh, well, following on from that display of male aggression, we've got an article
God.
in The Australian today titled Nature's Role Swapping in the Species. And it's actually quite an interesting article. It's talking about a book called Females and the Species by Betty Ann Kevels. I think that's the right pronunciation.
Better get it right.
It starts off poor Mother Nature, isn't that ideologically unsound?
Well, it goes on to explain it.
Go on,
Just
then.
reading from the article. There can be few women who have not at some stage read and been irritated by books claiming that the reason A, men go to work, or B, men have a roving eye and women are faithful, or C, men use their brains while women drown in their emotions, is because this is the way monkeys do it, or geese do it, or whatever. It must be admitted, though, that the monkey theory is much more popular. In this book, she outlines a quite different role for a lot of female species types. That's the wrong
No,
description, isn't it?
No, that's okay, because we'll put the dittos above that. Female species types, man. Right, go on.
No, keep going.
That's all right.
Okay. Fighting for airspace here. She talks about the different role for the lots of female animals and how it's quite different from the way it's been described in the past by lots of naturalists and ecologists. Perhaps, Bob, you might like to talk a bit about this.
Well, firstly,
It's absolutely true. There are no examples that you can go to in the animal kingdom that should prove that men should go to work or anything
no,
like
it's
that.
complete and utter cobblers.
It's one of these myths that people have been going on about for years.
Sociobiology, there's a whole science founded on absolute crap, and this is probably identifying parts of that science, but it's just as bad to go back and point to examples of the opposite to try to balance it up. If you want to find out what a particular species does, you watch the species. You don't go watching other species. You'll learn no more about watching chimpanzees to try to translate their behaviour into humans than you will by trying to learn about baboons and watching chimpanzees. That'll give you an idea of how far your error can be out. One lot live in a rainforest, feed each other, scratch their heads and all the rest, and a pretty passive kind of crew with a totally different social structure to baboons who rove on the open plains, and so it goes on. Sociobiology is that amazing science that satisfies people's great need to relate everything back to bloody people and put them on the pinnacle of achievement. If you've listened to RRR and if you've listened to us on RRR, you realise that one of our great debates is that people are indeed animals, and being unique animals, just like silverfish and chimpanzees, you can only learn about people by watching people. Those justifications for why men work and why women don't and all that kind of crap are just absolute, just give a real good insight into the person doing the bloody research and not much of a clue as to what's actually happening.
So it's probably a good book actually to point towards these sociobiologists and say how you can take your evidence and use it for just about absolutely anything you want.
That's right. The Science Show actually a couple of years ago did a brilliant rundown of sociobiology and just tore it apart in about 4 shows, and their conclusion was you can find a paper about any animal to prove anything you want. So any of you out there who use sociobiology to justify your bent behaviour, forget it.
I think one of the other points that's being made in this article is that when people have been observing animals, they've either not looked at the female species at all, or if they have, they've played it right down and just seen it as a stereotype of how they'd like to see female humans.
Right. There's one really good exception to that, Libby, and that's a woman called Jane Goodall. And she worked firstly with chimpanzees in Africa, and then she went on to work with wild dogs, hyenas and jackals. And she's got 2 book out on the chimps and a book out on my wild dogs. I can't tell you the publisher. We might try to find it if we get a few requests off air. Actually have people on the phone, so if you want to ring up Offended today, you can ring up straight away. And in that regard, she's really excellent, and what she does is a very interesting thing. Instead of attributing sort of sexist type characteristics to animals, she attributes full human emotions to animals and then starts to look at them as individuals. And when you start to move along that track, you find out a hell of a lot more about an animal and their individuality than what you ever will by looking at them all very blandly, particularly things like mammals that have complicated behaviour. Because when you have complicated behaviour, you can't just understand it, the differences between individuals, by calling them A1 and A2. You've got to give them a name, you've got to work out some kind of character. Now, when you're reading someone's work like that, you're very clear as to where they're coming from. If you're reading someone who's trying to be divorced who says, we looked at chimpanzee A and they went to work for 4 hours, 25 minutes a day and all that kind of crud, that scientifically verifiable bullshit that seems to occupy 50% of our tertiary institute's time, then you're going to get a totally distorted picture. So that's the kind of thing to look for when you're reading about animals, as people who relate to them a lot like you relate to each other.
Actually, a little aside from that is it's quite legal to go out and watch animals copulate, and you can make up all sorts of theories as to what animals do in sex and what humans do in sex. But in the Northern Territory, it's still illegal to have sex in your bedroom with the blinds up.
Yes, I heard about that.
Seems.
It's legal to watch people copulate if you're a policeman, and it's illegal to do it and be watched by a copper in the Northern Territory. That's just bloody amazing, isn't it? So, well, that just means no sex in the Territory if you go up there, mate. Okay.
We'll go to a track. This is a New Zealand band, The Chills.